Yeah, I take this opportunity in order to invite all of you to this book club meeting. We are Alchemist Book Club. We meet once a month with heroing a book which is chosen by the members. And we come together to explore, discuss, debate, and also take on some learnings from that book. Idea being that why not we look at the book from various different dimensions uh, than just having a look at it in terms of just going through it alone. So a little bit of Alchemist Book Club itself is, we have started exactly on 14th April 2018, that is 2 years back. And for 2 years, we have been a closed group. And this April, a couple of months back, we decided that we'll open up and then we will invite more and more people because there are so many other people who would love to discuss about books than just reading. So far we have covered more than 27 books, 21 books, 27 meetings. The books ranging from self-improvement to creativity to parenting and various genres. The discussions and the learnings are the major focus. It's not just to complete the book, and we are not particular that everybody should be able to read the book and come, whether they have read or not. What kind of a value can we give in that book? The book meetings is what is important to us. So extracting and contemplating and penetrating from different dimensions on a subject is what we cherish more than just finishing up the book. So some of the instructions for this meeting would be, so during the presentation, so please mute yourself, turn off the videos so that we can save some bandwidth for everyone. Then you can ask your questions in the chat box and it will be taken up during the discussions. You can use thumbnails and claps, thumbs up to express your support. And once the book club meeting opens for discussion, then you can unmute and turn on your video to speak, to answer your questions or share whatever you find is relevant. Make sure that your sharing is brief. So once again, thanks for joining in. If some of you are joining in for the first time, most welcome. So one thing about this book club, whether you are a facilitator or you're a presenter, you're an organizer or listener, all of us are the same. We are all just active participants who have come over here to learn, connect, share, and grow. So today the book, what we are going to discuss is the book on Ikigai. So I leave it to the facilitator, one of the facilitators today, Satya, to take over and start with the book discussion. Satya, over to you.
Thank you, TG. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. You may be wondering what this Ikigai book is about. The subtitle of this book says, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life. Okay. We all definitely want to have a long and happy life. Long is definitely assured by the medical advances and technology, but happy life is something which is we need to do ourselves. I don't think any technology or others can help it. But there is a slight variation to it. How others can contribute to your happiness is what this book is about. Let's get into it. What this term Ikigai means. It's a reason for being. Ikigai, a Japanese term, is a reason for being. What they have done is they went to Okinawa to understand why this place has more number of people who are living longer than anywhere else in the world. Apparently, that is one of the 5 blue zones. Blue zones is a place it's earmarked saying that the people who are centenarians and above, those who are living longer. And Okinawa comes on top of it because for the sheer number of long people who are living long. So these authors of this book went about studying their habits, studying their, every aspect of their life to see what makes them to live longer. And of course, happier too. Okay. So that is why this book was written, and we will go about it. Now, the reason for being, it's like purpose. What is your purpose? If you understand your purpose, actually you will be happy. That is what the crux of this book is about. You will be happy and you will be making money, everything. Let's look at it, this Venn diagram. The pink diagram talks about what you are good at it. The yellow one talks about what you love doing it. And the Cyan one at the bottom talks about what you can be paid for, like your job. Okay, on the right, the green one talks about what the world needs. Okay, now if what happens if 2 or 3 or in fact all 4 of them come together? If all 4 of them come together, is that you found your purpose? Ikigai. I remember a famous quote by Pele saying that he was, he was found by some club manager saying too good in football. So they asked him to join the club. And after a month of practice, and he thought it was practice, he was playing, okay. The club paid him a salary. And he thought, oh, you pay me money for playing? So that is how he started. He was good at playing. He enjoyed it. And that is what the club wanted. So he was actually contributing his skills to the club, and the club finally paid him. So he found his purpose in that. Similarly, many of us have found purpose in what we are doing it. You may have 2 or 3 circles going in for you, but if you can put in your effort, understand what is sticking, what is that your purpose for your life, you should be able to get all the 4 circles together and identify your purpose. That is the whole essence of this book. Okay, let me move in. So, what is your reason for being? That is what you need to identify. What is your ikigai? Is someone trying to say something? I hear some noise.
No, okay, you continue.
Okay. The book goes on to say this. They ask this question. The first page itself, they will ask the question: what is your reason for being? Okay. Everyone has their own reason. You don't have to answer it, and that you don't have to even take what the book says. But however, that very next paragraph or the content of this book, it says, whatever you do, don't retire. In fact, it will be surprising to know that in Japanese language, there is no word meaning retirement. That as we speak in English, you retire from your work and then, after 60, you sit at home, play with your grandchildren, if you're lucky. But that is not what the Japanese do. They just till the end of their life, they do what they like to do, what they keep on doing. That's one of the major secrets. Coming to Okinawa, yes, they have the largest number of people who are living for longer. And surprisingly, they have fewer chronic illnesses such as cancer and anything else, which is going to, make your life, day-to-day life, difficult. And they have an enviable level of vitality and health. The blood test revealed fewer free radicals, maybe because they claim saying that, look, we drink a lot of green teas and white teas, everything. And free radicals helps you to, it controls the cellular aging process. Okay. Rate of dementia is well below the global average. It is really a surprising one. For today, we are talking about even at 60s and 70, we keep forgetting a lot of things, and whereas it is surprisingly for Japanese is much below the global average. Okay. Now, this concept they talk about is connected for life. It's like an Indian context. If I take it, it's like a village life. Everyone knows everyone else, and they work in a close-knit environment. Everybody contributes to each other's prosperity. And it's a similar thing which is seen there in Okinawa too. It is again a rural area. It is not like Tokyo or any other city. And being in a village area in that kind of environment, each of them will look out for another. They help each other, and then if somebody is having some tough time with financially or anything else, the rest of the villagers, contribute and bring them up in a better position. And some of them think that doing this itself is my ikigai. I need to ensure my family and my surroundings, my entire community in my village have to be happy. So that gives me happiness. That is a kind of concept that Japanese perfected it in Okinawa, which to a greater extent, I also see it in Indian villages. Okay. Now, I'm not sure why T.G. Srinivasan, who spoke earlier, selected me, maybe because I have a lot of gray hair and I look old. He thought to give authenticity to this, he asked me to take this subject, I guess, but never 3 comments. He asked him to speak about the rest of the concepts here. Maybe I'll take over at the end. And they're going to tell us the rest of the secrets that are covered in this book. They might not be secrets, maybe it's a simple common sense, but I call up Soumya now to take over and then talk about the rest of the points here. Soumya, over to you.
Hi everyone. So the chapter we'll be seeing now is called Anti-Aging Secrets. The authors give us about 5 secrets, but before we go into the secrets, they talk a little bit about life expectancy. So they say that for more than a century, we've been adding about 3.5 months to our life expectancy every year. But what would happen if we had the technology to increase our life expectancy by 1 year every year? That means theoretically we would reach immortality. To understand this better, they give us an example and ask us to imagine that we're standing on a road and there's a rabbit at a distance down the road in front of us holding a sign which has our death age in it. When we move closer to the rabbit and reach the rabbit, we die. Now imagine for every year that you move down the road, the rabbit moves half a year ahead. So you would still reach the rabbit and die, but you would do it a little much later. Now they ask us to imagine for every year that we move ahead, the rabbit also moves a year ahead, which means we would never reach the rabbit. And that they refer to this as aging's escape velocity, that is being immortal. Some researchers say that this level of technology and reaching aging's escape velocity can be reached in a matter of decades, but then some experts say we stop regenerating our cells after about 120 years. So immortality might or might not be possible, but they still give us a few anti-aging secrets to slow down the aging process. So the first secret they give us is having an active mind. Now the mind is connected to the body, and the health of the mind depends on the body and vice versa. So maintaining an active and adaptable mind actually has a positive effect on the body and slows down the aging process. Just like how a lack of physical exercise will take a negative toll on the body, a lack of mental exercise will deteriorate our neurons and it reduces our ability to react to our surroundings. So they say it's important to keep giving your brain workouts, mental workouts. When you present the brain with new challenges, it makes new connections and it revitalizes. So it's important to expose yourself, to keep exposing yourself to change and stepping out of your comfort zone, even if it means having a little bit of anxiety. And the mental training they refer to here need not be anything too complicated. It can even be just interacting with other people or playing a game. That is enough stimuli to keep the brain active. Now there's a negative side here. Our neurons start to age when we're still in our 20s. But this process can be slowed by intellectual activity and learning something new every day, or like meeting new people or doing something new every day. So yeah, keeping your mind active and young slows down the aging process. So the next anti-aging secret that they give us is being mindful about reducing stress. Stress causes premature aging. The American Institute of Stress has said that most health problems are caused by stress. They conducted a study where they asked a young doctor to do a job interview, which they made even more stressful by asking him to perform complex math problems for like half an hour. After the test was done, they took his blood samples and they found that his body reacted to stress the same way that it would react to a pathogen. Like it produced antibodies and triggered an immune response. This is bad because the antibodies not only neutralize the harmful agents or the pathogens, but also attack our healthy living cells and damage them and cause them to age prematurely. They also conducted another study where they studied women with sick children or ill children and women with healthy children. They found that women with ill children had a lot of stress and their cell structures were weakened by this and they were aging prematurely. And they also found that the greater the amount of stress, the greater the degenerative effect on cells. But in today's world, everyone has hectic lives and we're always in a constant state of competition. So now stress seems like the natural response because it helps us thrive in stressful situations. Stress has always helped us throughout evolution to deal with difficult situations and to flee from predators. So it has helped humans quite a lot, but there are some key differences between the stress patterns of cave dwellers and modern humans. Cave dwellers were relaxed most of the time and were stressed out only at certain situations. But modern humans are working most of the time and they're always alert and waiting for a call or an email notification. They're always on their feet. And the threats that the cave dwellers faced were real threats. If they didn't react, they'd be killed by a predator. So having high levels of stress was useful to keep the body healthy. But for modern humans, it's actually interesting. The brain associates the ping of a cell phone or an email notification with the threat of a predator. So since we're always on our feet, this low and constant state of stress actually has a lot of health implications, including irritability, insomnia, anxiety, high blood pressure, etc., etc. So it's important to reduce stress for us. But how do we reduce stress? They ask us to be mindful about reducing stress. So the central premise of this mindfulness, this method, is focusing on the self and observing our reactions to whatever situations we face. Even if they're conditioned by habit, you just have to be conscious of them. This helps because it helps us to stay in the here and now and not, we wouldn't spiral out into negative thoughts and, I don't know, be depressed. So they ask us to turn off the autopilot. Our brain has a tendency to go into autopilot. It is a lot more comfortable with sticking to routines and just carrying out habits instead of taking up new tasks. So they ask us to turn off this autopilot and be mindful of whatever it is we're doing. And the way to reach mindfulness is meditation or yoga or breathing exercises, etc. And they say achieving mindfulness is a gradual process of training, but once we learn to focus our mind completely, we can reduce stress and we can finally slow the aging process. But also they say that stress is not all bad. A little bit stress is good for us, because they found that people who had very active lives and people who faced challenges quite a lot in their lives lived longer than people who had a more relaxed lifestyle and who retired early. So a little bit of stress can be good for a fulfilling life and the longer life. So that was the third secret. The fourth secret is being less sedentary. So we all spend too much time at home or at work being seated. This obviously takes a toll on our physical fitness and also increases appetite, and it curbs the desire to participate in social activities. And being sedentary can also lead to hypertension, imbalanced eating, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and even certain kinds of cancer. This condition of being sedentary is not only a problem for adults, but even children who are sedentary suffer from high rates of obesity and all the health implications that comes with obesity. So the authors here give us a few simple steps that we can do carry out every day to be less sedentary. So the first one is walking to work, or just going on a walk for 20 minutes every day. Second is using your feet instead of using the escalator or the elevator. This is good for our posture, our muscles, and our respiratory system. The third is participating in social or leisure activities to reduce the time we spend on TVs or screens. The next is replacing junk food with fruit, because you'll have less of an urge to snack on things and you'll have more nutrients in your body. The next is getting the right amount of sleep. They say that 7 to 9 hours is ideal. The next is playing with children or pets or joining a sports team. This is not only good for physical health, but also boosts our self-esteem. And the last one is being conscious of our daily routines. So that way we can detect any like harmful or negative habits and replace them with more positive ones. So the next secret is sleep. So most telltale sign about someone's age is their skin. It gets wrinkly and it gets lots of spots and it just looks unhealthy as we grow older. So what models do is they sleep 9 to 10 hours before every fashion show, the night before every fashion show. So this gives them a wrinkle-free appearance and like a healthy, radiant glow. Science also says that sleep is a key anti-aging tool, because when we sleep, we produce a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin is a powerful antioxidant and it has a lot of benefits. It strengthens the immune system. It contains an element that protects against cancer. It promotes natural production of insulin. It slows the onset of Alzheimer's disease, and it helps prevent osteoporosis and fight heart disease. But melatonin production decreases after the age of 30. But we can compensate for this by eating a balanced diet and getting more calcium, getting a moderate amount of sun every day, getting enough sleep, and avoiding stress and alcohol or tobacco or caffeine, anything that would interfere with our sleep cycles. So the last secret is our attitude. The mind, of course, has tremendous power over the body. And most doctors agree that keeping the body young is keeping the mind active. Did someone say something?
So you continue, Soumya.
Okay, sir. So in one study, they found that there were two common traits between people who lived the longest. One was they had a positive attitude, and the second is that they had a high degree of emotional awareness. So basically, when you face obstacles, facing it positively and having the ability to deal with your emotions in a positive way. They also talk about having a stoic attitude, that is being in a state of serenity in the face of a setback. It can lower anxiety and stress levels and stabilizes our behavior. Many centenarians and supercentenarians, people who live above 100, they have similar profiles. They have had full lives, which were difficult at times, but they faced it with a positive attitude, and they were able to overcome any obstacle they faced with a positive attitude. So those were the 5 anti-aging secrets. And that concludes this chapter. The next chapter is logotherapy. Logotherapy is a school of psychology founded by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a neurologist, psychiatrist, and a Holocaust survivor. So logotherapy can be compared in certain ways to psychoanalysis. In psychoanalysis, you lie down on a couch with a therapist and you talk about things that are hard to say. But in logotherapy, you sit straight in a chair, look at the therapist, and you hear things that are hard to hear. For example, Viktor Frankl says that one of his first questions that he asks his patients is, why do you not commit suicide? And the patients often find reasons and find good reasons, and are able to carry on well. So what logotherapy basically does is it helps you find reasons to live.
Okay, Soumya.
Soumya, first, please.
Soumya, shall we cover the logotherapy in detail later? Because I know it's a very important topic. We'll move on to the next topics and then we'll come back to it again if you have time.
Okay, sure.
Satya, over to you to follow to the next presenter.
Okay.
I hope I can start.
Yes,
so,
yes, please.
I think this presenter is going to be.
No, it's.
Yeah,
it's good.
Okay.
Okay, this is Atulya, and good evening to everybody. So this is my first book club discussion, and a lot of firsts have happened throughout the process. And this is my first read of the book Ikigai, or any book from the self-help genre itself. This is my first attempt to understand Ikigai, the state of flow and longevity. So before I disrupt the flow of the discussion, let's move on to the discussion with the chapters 4, 5, and 6. So state of flow, what is it? Positive psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi defines that the concept of flow as the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience itself is so enjoyable that people will do it at great cost for the sheer sake of doing it. To make it simple, when one is in a state of flow, they tend to enjoy the work more than the result. They seem to have lost their temporal sense, that is, they forget the passage of time. One is completely immersed in experience, not thinking about or distracted by anything else. Being readers, I guess we would all agree to one example quoted in the book. We spend an afternoon with a book and forget about the world going by until we notice the sunset and realize we haven't eaten dinner. This is a great example of a person being in a state of flow. I hope I wouldn't be wrong when I say that the audience is in a state of flow while listening to the presenters. Why should one be in a state of flow? The author says that the happiest people are the ones who aren't the ones who achieve the most. They are the ones who spend most of their time in a state of flow. But where does this flow exist? Where can one find it? The authors have stories, anecdotes, and case studies from Japan to show that even the simplest of people can find the state of flow within them. The authors observe that Japanese professionals are renowned for their perseverance and even obsession and absorption in their tasks with thorough attention to detail. The people of Japan have a unique talent for creating new technologies while preserving artisanal traditions and techniques, they explain. Steve Jobs himself was a big fan of Japanese design in porcelain and electronics. This love led him to artisan Yukio Shakunaga. The spirit of sophisticated simplicity, in contrast to lazy simplicity, is visible in Japanese art, engineering, and culture. The Japanese are skilled at bringing nature and technology together, not man versus nature, but rather in a union of the two, the authors explain. But the art of staying in flow is not easy. One has to lose all distractions and increase focus on the present, on the task they are doing, and on the process. Ikigai is a book that focuses more on the hows than on the whats. The authors have given easy steps to achieve and sustain flow. In 2013, Owen Scaffer proposed 7 conditions necessary for generating flow. These include knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, knowing how well you are doing it, knowing where to go if navigation is involved, high perceived challenges, high perceived skills, and freedom from distractions. The authors of Ikigai also suggest simple strategies that can be followed to increase flow. Strategy 1, choosing a difficult task. Scaffold's model encourages us to take on tasks that we have a chance of completing but are slightly out of our comfort zone. A sufficient level of challenge sustains the immersive power of flow. Too much leads to anxiety and too little leads to boredom. Taking small steps at a time and cultivating the habit of discipline helps to get past inertia, blocks into the zone of flow. This is also shown in the Erskine-Dodson law, which is presented in the graph on the slide. So if you see the graph, you can figure out that one attains flow when the stimulation or challenges in the task is at moderate level. Else they are likely to be bored or to be anxious. Strategy 2. Have a clear, concrete objective with a focus on the process. To quote my father, enjoy the journey and don't bother about the results. The author explains, having a clear objective is more important in achieving flow, but we also have to know how to leave it behind when we get down to business. Once the journey has begun, we need to keep the objective in mind without obsessing over it. This helps to avoid stages of mental block and confusion. So in short, clear objective plus focus in the process is equal to state of flow. Strategy 3. Concentrate on a single task. We live in an era where most of our generation is suffering from a multitasking epidemic. Multitasking not only lowers productivity by 60%, but also decreases IQ by 10 points. The brains of multitaskers are trained to pay attention to every stimulus, regardless of its importance. This is not good when one wants to achieve the state of flow. Flow is only achieved when one concentrates on a single task and the stimulus associated with it. But in the digital world, one is bound to get distracted by the buzzers on their phones and laptops. The author suggests many ways to increase concentration on a single task, but most of them involves using less screen time or avoiding mobile phones when in a state of flow. Amongst these difficult habits, I found the Pomodoro technique to be easy and accessible by everybody. In layman terms, this is called spaced practice. The Pomodoro technique or the spaced practice recommends 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest for each cycle. The author leaves it to each individual to find their pace and be disciplined in their cycles. Distractions aren't easy to avoid, but if one can train their mind to return to the present in case they are facing any distractions. This can be achieved by practicing meditation or mindfulness or anything that helps them to get back on track, like swimming or taking a walk. Sustaining the flow. We can even find flow in our routine mundane tasks. The ability to turn routine tasks into moments of micro flow into something we enjoy is the key to our being happy, since we all do such tasks. Like while scribbling doodles while listening to a boring lecture, these are moments of micro flow that we undertake to avoid the boring stuff in our life. So rituals also have their own aspects of flow. Rituals give us a clear rules and objectives which help us enter a state of flow. When confronted with a big goal, try to break it down into small parts and attack each part one by one. Rituals help us, giving us the process and the sub-steps on the path to achieving a goal. To quote the author's word, as the rule of the thumb, remind yourself ritual over goals. Instant vacations, getting there through meditation. Training the mind can get us to a place of flow more quickly. Meditation is one way to exercise our mental muscles. The author explains that we all carry a spa along with us everywhere we go. It's just a matter of knowing how to get in it. And it is a matter of practice that everyone can get in it and use it. Now, we are in chapter 5, Masters of Longevity. Here, the author gives us quotes from super centenarians, people who live to 110 years of age or more. On the slide, you can see a few quotes by super centenarians who age between 111 to 120. The chapter provides insights on fascinating interviews with people over 100 years of age, such as have a tremendous thirst for life. I have never eaten meat in my life. I see badly, I hear badly, and I feel bad, but everything is fine. Keep your mind and body busy. And the most funniest one is Alexander Image saying, I haven't died yet. So, longevity in Japan is attributed to healthy eating habits, integrated healthcare system, culture, sense of community, and people are driven by a purpose that guides you throughout your life and pushes you to make things of beauty and utility for the community and yourself. The author explains that the secret to long life, however, is not held by the super centenarians alone. There are many people of advanced age who offer us inspiration and ideas for bringing energy and meaning to our lives. Artists are a great example for achieving this feat through their art. Chapter 6 is a continuation to the previous chapter and gives us lessons from Japan's centenarians. Ogimi is a village located in Kunigami district, Okinawa Prefecture, Japan. The 100 interviewed residents of this district share a number of lessons. Spend time with people, nurture friendship, cultivate a garden, do regular exercise, have tea together, slow down, enjoy things, be optimistic, do volunteer work, and indulge in laughter, smile, and dance. The people of Okinawa have a strong sense of community and celebrate rituals of life. The authors who advise playing with pets, the authors also advise playing with pets or children as well as sufficient sporting activities, exposure to sun, and adequate sleep. They live in groups and embrace communal lifestyle. They celebrate their culture, festivals, and social activities together. They embrace each other and celebrate little moments of life like birthdays, and they play sports and little games that turn them into children that make them enjoy everything that they are doing. They are strong rooted in their beliefs of their religion, and the main religion in Okinawa is Ryukyu Shinto. They worship infinite spirits of nature, home, and other elements of life. This is very similar to our Puranas, where we worship our Hindu Puranas, where we worship elements of nature like Agni, Varuna, and water. They have a staunch belief in the Okinawa people also worship infinite spirits, and they have a staunch belief in rituals and festivals. The women are held in high regard and are considered spiritually superior to men. Also, they believe in ancestral worship. So, I guess their other inferences drawn by the authors include being passionate about what the people are doing, even if might seem insignificant. They are driven by a purpose or even several purposes and are celebrating the little things that they are trying to do. So that was the end of chapters 4, 5, and 6. Thank you.
Okay. Next presenter, please.
Sudash.
Sudash.
Hi guys, I think you can hear me.
You need to speak louder.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I could hear, but if you can speak louder.
Your voice is very feeble, doctor.
Is it audible now, Uncle?
Yes, better.
Okay, so the chapter now I'm going to discuss is the Ikigai diet. So already Satya Uncle talked about Okinawa, and there were a lot of centenarians right there. So let's see what was their dieting secret which they had. So the author says a lot of points, and I put it in 5 points. So the first one, the Okinawans try to include at least 5 servings of vegetables and fruits in their diet every day. And the next thing is the rainbow diet, which means that they try to include fruits and vegetables of all different colors
variety was one thing which was very, a big thing in their food. And almost 30% of the calories that they take in came only from vegetables. This is very low for us. We just taken only about 5% from vegetables. So also they took vegetables, fruits, spices, and all different kinds of colors. So the next thing was less sugar. So the Okinawans were not very fond of desserts actually. So they tend to take very less sugar, less candies, and everything. And even if they want to take something, they took only sugarcane juice and used it to incorporate in their food. So it was not refined sugar at all. And there have also been studies that sugar cane has anti-carcinogenic effect recently. So the next thing is that they consumed a lot of fish compared to the rest of Japan people. Fish has a lot of omega-3 fatty acids and proteins which can delay aging, which have been proven to delay aging. So the next thing, that is the most important thing. I think that author talks about it in 3 different places. It's about cutting the salt. The Okinawans consume very less salt compared to all the other people in the rest parts of the world. And salt can do very detrimental effects to your body. Particularly us Indians, we love all the salty foods, the salty junk foods. But what it does to your body is that when you take a lot of salt, it is what is called as an osmotic substance. So it just absorbs the water from the cells, making the cells relatively dehydrated. And it also puts increased pressure on your heart, So eating salt in higher quantities over a long time can put your heart in a risk. So that's it for the Ikigai diet. So the next thing is about Hara Hachibu. This is the 80-20 formula which the Okinawa people followed. It means that you should eat only till 80% of your stomach capacity. The 20% of your stomach capacity should be left empty so that it can digest. And this has proven to increase longevity. So the author suggests us some 3 simple ways on how we can actually do this. One thing he says is that we should stop eating when we are a little hungry. That is the point where we should just stop eating our food. The second point, what he says is, I don't think anybody can follow that. He asks us to skip desserts. Okay. So the third one was, the third one is something all of us can incorporate. It has got a lot of psychological thing. So what the Okinawan people do is that they serve their food in small plates and in small bowls, and they don't have courses of meal like appetizer and main course and dessert. It was all in a single plate, some vegetables, some miso soup, some rice, and that's it. So when the mind sees it, it thinks that's a lot of food. So that'll be okay for me. So you'll be tricked into believing that you're actually eating a lot, but actually you're eating a very less. This is completely opposite to the buffet where we go, where we see a lot of food and our brain and our mind just wants to eat a lot. So I think all of us can follow this, having small plates to eat less. The next panel is about eat less to live longer. The author says that when we eat less, our longevity increases. It's because glucose, the food that we take in that releases glucose, it is all very helpful for us. But there is a Tamil Paramoli which says that alavukku mirinal amirthamum nanju. So even if you take a lot of glucose, that does the worst to your body. It releases a lot of free radicals. It releases a lot of molecules called as IGF-1. The author mentions about it. And that has proven to be causing a lot of aging things to us. So he tries to tell us that we need to have a lot of superfoods in our diet. That is the foods which have a lot of nutritional content, but the calories that it adds is very less. So these are, the examples of the natural antioxidants are also some of the examples of superfood. So the first one is white tea, and the second one, the green tea. So white tea and green tea are both the same leaves, but white tea is taken from the younger leaves, whereas the green tea is taken from the older leaves and they are a bit fermented. And green tea has been found to have the maximum amount of antioxidants. The antioxidants basically, they kill the free radicals in your body. They kill the toxins in your body that causes aging. The next one, Sanpincha, that is a very special tea that they serve in Okinawa. It is a jasmine infused tea. So it has a lot of benefits. It has a lot of antioxidants again. So the next thing is citrus, berries, dry fruits. The shikuwaza. So the shikuwaza is basically a fruit like mosambi that is native to the Okinawa island. So one interesting fact about this is that the centenarians, or the people who celebrated birthdays, they had shikuwaza cakes only. So shikuwaza was already an antioxidant. So you see, they were celebrating their birthday with antioxidants so that they can live much more longer. Whereas us, we just, celebrate with cakes filled with sugar, which I already said, it just decreases the, our longevity. So the next thing is like olive oil, and also red wine has also shown some antioxidants. The next thing. Okay, so that's it for that chapter. So we saw how the Okinawans, manage their diet. They also say that you can also fast if you can't do the hara achibu. Like you can fast at least 1 or 2 times per week. So that will be good for your body. So the next thing, gentle movement. So now we saw how little the Okinawans ate. Now let's see how they burn the little things that they ate. Okay. So that is the gentle movements and longer life. So what you see is a form of Tai Chi. Next slide, please. Okay. So the author says that these are the Eastern principles. These are basically the so-called exercises that we follow right now. For us, exercises mean sweating a lot, pumping our muscles, and then running a lot, But the Okinawans believe that it's not about, sweating. It's only about just doing some gentle movements and being active. All the centenarians were like that, they were active even in their final ages. So most of them followed all these the disciplines which I mentioned above. The author also talks about how sitting is detrimental, like how Soumya pointed out. So the first one, let's go to the Eastern discipline. First one, so that is the radio taiso. This is followed by people in Japan. So what it involves is, it is just a morning warm-up that the people do. And it involves the dynamic stretching of the muscles and then the mobility of the joints, just bringing about in a very gentle way. You can see the figure. It's so simple. It's just about raising your hands up and then bringing it back down. That's it. That's the maximum thing that the Okinawan people did as an exercise. So I'll go to the next thing. So that is the yoga, right? So it is very interesting that people in Japan actually followed yoga. And the author says that yoga came from India and it is derived from the word yog, which is a Sanskrit word. Yoga is simply a wood which connects the animal to the cart, right? So what yoga means is that it connects the mind with the soul and helps build a healthy lifestyle around it. So this is how the author defines it. So he talks about the various styles of yoga, which we know, the karma yoga, the bhakti yoga, the mantra yoga, the hatha yoga, which is the asanas and all those. He also mentions about the steps of sun salutation, how it is important, So it was all about embracing nature and doing exercise at the same time. It was such a holistic, they dealt it with such an holistic approach. So the next thing was Tai Chi. Chi translates to energy. So Tai Chi was a Chinese martial art, which was actually brought to bring peace within oneself, the inner peace that Kung Fu Panda talks about. That's what Tai Chi is about. The author talks about the 10 principles of Tai Chi, and he also talks about the imitating cloud, which is a step in Tai Chi. So this is again like sun salutation, right? We are looking at the nature, we are looking at the clouds, and we are just trying to imitate them and incorporate it as an exercise. I thought it was very interesting. The next one. So that is, you pronounce it as Chi Hong. Okay. I went through the YouTube video for that. So it's Chi Hong. Okay. So this was followed by a lot of people in Okinawa again. So what it translates, Chi is again, I said energy, and Hong, it means workforce. So it's about activating an individual's life force. So it believes that every person is made up of five forms, I can say. So those are the earth, fire, water, metal, and wood. And there are specific exercises how you can evoke these forms within yourself. So the next thing, that is called as shiatsu. This was also very interesting. This is again an ancient art form that used the pressure of the palms and the thumb and the dorsum of the hand to put pressure on our own muscles to relax them. It is said to prevent wrinkles if you do it continuously, and even prevent arthritis. The doctors are finding so many medications to just get off the pain of arthritis, but we haven't got a drug to treat it. Here we have a brilliant thing to actually prevent it. So the next thing, please. This was again one more interesting thing. This is the 6 healing sounds. This is again a form of the Eastern discipline, which involves the coordination of the pronunciation of words, movement, and breathing, and using it to activate specific organs within our body. It sounds a little skeptical to me, but I still checked out a YouTube video on it, like the author suggested, and I tried to pronounce all those sounds, and it gave a lot of effect. I'll try to share the link. I think it'd be really beneficial. Next thing, please. Okay, so this is the last slide. So the author ends by saying that you breathe better and then live longer. What he means by breathe better is that you are taking in a breath, every 3 seconds, but you're not focusing much on it. The author wants you to consciously analyze your movements along with your breathing whenever you can. So he asks us to, take a deep breath even before we succumb to stress. It's not that only after stress we take a deep breath and then relax ourselves. We should just try to just breathe through all the problems and focus on it more. I think that's it. I think this is what the author wants to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take over from here. I have about 3 or 4 slides to wrap up the book, and then we will open up for discussion and questions. Okay, the other chapter which talks about is resilience. Now, Japanese are known for their resilience because, even the country itself, rose spectacularly after World War II. And they have mastered the art of, challenge and how to get over it. And because they're seeing through what's the worst thing that could happen. You have seen it. I mean, there is a chapter of discussion here as to, there is a habit they have. They think about what's the worst thing that could happen. They prepare themselves for it. In a corporate parlance, we talk about risk management. Okay, we think about what all could go wrong and then prepare ourselves. Buying insurance itself is like what thing could happen, so we buy an insurance. All these habits, it has all become their part of DNA. Resilience is part of Japanese DNA that is achieved through Buddhism and the teachings of Buddhism and the other isms that they follow, Stoicism, their faith. They apparently have more regional faith and practices, but all of them invariably leads to the same concept of how to rebuild themselves and how to be resilient of anything that could happen and how to overcome it. So one of the proverbs they say, Japanese proverb says, "You fall 7 times, but please get up for the 8th time." So that is the kind of proverb which is building their character. Fall 7 times, stand up for the 8th time. That is how they come up with it. And there's another concept is wabi-sabi. Now, wabi-sabi is like looking for imperfection. So the world is never perfect. Whichever way you look at it, people are always going to find fault in it, in anything that is very perfect. So they teach saying that, why don't you look at the beauty of in anything which is imperfect? Why don't you look at what is good in it? It's like Though people are bad, is there any one good habit that you can pick up from somebody? Can you magnify it? That is a kind of look. They train themselves to see beauty in perfection. They also train themselves to see beauty in imperfection. That is what it is. There's another concept which is ichigo, ichi. It simply says, this is the moment. This is not going to come back again. Just be in the moment, enjoy it, and let go of yourself. That is one way of enjoying life. I mean, you're not worried about the future. You're not going to bring all your past baggage into it and ruin the current, ruin the moment that you are in. And at the same time, don't think about all the future. Just enjoy the moment as it is. Anti-fragility. The Japanese are again, just because they gone through all these bad experiences in terms of economical goals, in terms of even life-threatening, all these tsunamis. It's a word that we heard for the first time in 2004, but then they're so used to it. So their DNA is for how to overcome all this fragile nature and then how to survive. That's how they think. So everything they do it, how to gain from whatever the disorder that we have, how to gain from whatever the tragedy that we are going through. That is how they come up with it. And they have a habit of creating a backup for the salary, because if like today we hear in COVID lockdown, a lot of people are, losing their only source of income and everything. But then there is a concept in Japan saying that, look, always have a backup plan. And they also have something called get rid of things, good riddance goals. Like for example, maybe you have certain bad habits, if you'd like to get rid of it. Take a goal, achieve it. So go for good riddance goals. And if you have not taken anything from the previous 30 slides, take this one slide alone. That is what Ikigai, 10 rules of Ikigai. Stay active and don't retire, number one. Just as we said earlier, there is no word called retirement in Japan. People don't retire. They end of the day, they do it. Only in city life, like in India, if you look at it, we all retire, say 55, 58, 60, depending on which organization you are. We retire around 60, 65, except if you are not a politician, so we're supposed to be retiring and sitting at home. Whereas in people in village who are doing whatever work they are doing, it either agricultural or carpentry, any other work that they do it as long as their body is active and cooperative, and they keep on doing it. There is no concept of retirement. Take it slow. Normally people say, elders say, take it slow, there is no hurry. You just enjoy every moment and then take it as we go along. That is the next point, number 2. Point 3, that 80-20 rule, don't fill your stomach and feel bloated. Definitely no. Surround yourself with good friends. We all know, spending time with friends actually relaxes you and all that kind of good thing that comes with good friends. But ensure that you have good friends. That's why the word is there. And get in shape for your next birthday. Point number 5. It doesn't matter how fit you are, but you can still set up a goal for yourself and then get into action so that you can still be much better, fitter, and healthier by next birthday. Smile a lot, even if you are wearing a mask nowadays, but still smile so that other person can see your smile. Reconnect with nature. For city dwellers like us, it is very, very important, because that's why maybe once in a while you take a vacation and go to your countryside, you feel much better. Because we are connected with countryside, we are connected with nature. And that is our soul is there. So just that maybe we are physically sitting in city life because that is where we make our bread. But going back to the nature will help you, relaxes you beyond anything. Maybe a lot of us go to a weekend house, that's so-called, whatever that surnames that you have. You go there, countryside, country home, and then spend your time. Give thanks. Maybe our culture gives 1 or 2 days specifically for giving thanks. But if you have that as a part of your nature, giving thanks, definitely it helps you feel better and actually relaxes better. Live in the moment, as we said, that is ichigo moment. Live in the moment. There is no other moment. The future is not guaranteed, and the past is no longer there. So just live in the moment and follow your ikigai. Identify what makes you better. If you can get all the 4 circles together, what is that leading to? Can you do that? Are you doing that right now? Or can you at least identify what that could be the one, your ikigai, and then start planning how you're going to achieve it, so that you will enjoy what you are doing. That is your passion, and you also start earning money, and it's also contributing to the world. That is your ikigai. That. Thank you for listening, and I hand over to Divakar.
Thank you, Satya, and all the three speakers today. And it is a very new model which we tried in today's book club. So to make us more interesting and also to more engaging, I need one small help from each one of you. I'm just going to share my screen. I am just sharing my screen. I hope everyone is able to see a screen here. Can you just put a thumbs up in chat window so that I'm clear that everyone is able to see my screen?
Yes, Divakar, we can see.
Yeah. So my request to everyone is to log in to menti.com and just type the code 687150. What words come to your mind about the Ikigai from today's session? So we all listened for the last 50 to 60 minutes. My request to all of you is to type menti.com 687150, and what words come to your mind about Ikigai, whatever you have listened so far. It is just to understand about how the information has gone and what is that is our mind is currently thinking on it. Yes, it's quite interesting. I got from one speaker Ikigai, longevity, peace.
I'm not able to add Divakar.
No, you just log into the menti.com, use the code 687150. Yeah, someone has mentioned anti-aging. Good. Purpose. Awesome. Very good. Flow. Yes, it's interesting. Yes, well-being. Yeah, balanced diet. Yes. It's enjoy. Yeah. Simple, stress-free. Good. Live in the moment. Yeah. We are able to see some good words around that. 8 participants have given today. Resilience. Yes. Passion. Tai Chi. Bliss. Flow. Stress-free. Mindfulness. Happy. Nature, contentment, good friends, mindfulness, yes, awesome, true self, uh, because this will help the today's speakers that how much their words have been listened by the audience. So my request to around that 40 to 50 participants today, if you can type, this will really motivate the speakers today who are very young, who have taken a assignment of this book and prepared themselves, and we did not do any supervision. They themselves have created the slides. They come up with a brilliant flow on it. So it would be really good if you can give more words into it. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So we got at least 20 participants have updated on it. It's a good. So I'm just moving into the next slide. Yes, I got sleep. Yes, that's a new word. Yeah, the words are increasing enjoy. But these are all the few keywords which we are able to see more, right? Example, mindfulness, purpose, peace, life, longevity, passion. These are all some of the words which are common across the audience today, which has gone deeper into it. I can see some strong words like logotherapy, gentle movements, perseverance. Awesome. So thank you very much for getting into this survey. I'm just going to thank three speakers for amazing, brilliant way. So before going into on the next part, I would like to share my screen to have some interaction among ourselves to touch upon on few topics. Sorry, one sec. So one topic which you would like to cover it as part of um, Soumya was talking about it, and the whole discussion I would like to have it over here, and I want more little bit open among the audience to have it over here on this conversation. Search for Meaning. This is one of the book where the authors have been keen on communicating on this, and they actually have one separate topic called logotherapy. If we really want to go deeper on this, I think we need to go and explore the book called Man's Search for Meaning. But I would like to start with the questions, right? What is that one thing which create meaning for our life? And the argument in this book is we can't create or we don't create the meaning of our life, we discover it. I would like to open up this question to the audience that do you agree for it? And if you have any different thoughts about it, maybe I request you to share it. That would be really great. What is that? Are we discovering the meaning of our life? Or are we creating meaning for our life? That's the question I would like to explore it over here. Over to the audience to share some of your meanings. Maybe we can start with TG also. So TG, are you believing that are we creating a meaning for our life, or are we discovering it the meaning for our life?
I agree with you. Sorry?
No, you can share it from your experience, TG.
No, if the author has said it, then we need to agree now. Now that we belong to a book club, we need to agree.
So what's your personal view?
Yeah, we don't. Life doesn't have any meaning. So we create the meaning. So I think we create the meaning is what I think. Okay. Basically, we need to find out. I think you're connecting both the books. So if you have to understand Ikigai as a book is the way of living. So purpose, what they mention is one aspect of it. But many people confuse to get the purpose is the main thing of Ikigai. When you read through the book, we understand that it is a lot that goes into the way that we live as a community that matters. And then, one of the aspects is to find what comes so naturally, what you are good at, what you love to do, and keep doing it so that the ultimate purpose is to live longer and happily. So we need to create that. I think that's what I would say. I want to hear from others.
Yeah, thank you, TJ. I heard one person, Balasubramanian Venkatesh, has raised his hand. Maybe he can share some of his view. Whether are we creating the meaning for our life, or are we discovering the meaning for our life?
Hey, in my opinion, I think we are discovering our life because if you typically look back at your whole life, there are always threads where you really found the happiness. And it's not that at a certain age, once you found out what life is, and then you realize that this is what is a life, or you can't actually fixate something at certain point of time. There's always a thread. And in fact, one of the processes by John Hitler, it's called talent discovery. I would want to correlate that with this. So everything is a discovery. You are built in with these kind of things, and you only discover it by accident, or some people go in search of it. So you can't create a meaning, and I would say you have to discover it. It is there within you.
Awesome, sir. Awesome. I know I completely agree with the author on this. Is that we need to discover the meaning for our life. And one of the things which author says that, right, we can't find that immediately that, hey, this is the meaning for my life at age 20 or 30 or and then. What both of them are sharing it over here is that which can be adjusted or transformed. So during the process in our life, we will be able to adjust it accordingly and transform ourselves into a different thing and then to take it forward. I completely agree on it. And the another question which I would like to ask the audience about is that how are we managing worry? Because that is one thing which has been covered very deeply by this book when I was reading about it. One thing is about on how do we manage worry. I would like to bring this question to the audience so that they can share some of their experiences, that how are they managing their worries in there. I think two participants have raised their hand. Mr. Vikash, can you share from your experience, Vikash?
Yeah, basically, I feel that the we need to be so self-aware that the distance between our expectations and our reality is where the worry lies. So you bridge the distance, you are aware of it, and how much is the farther the distance between your expectations and your reality, that much is the quantum of your worry.
Yep.
And if you're able to assess that, be self-aware of that, come to terms with it, deal with it, well, you're good to go.
Yep. It's a brilliant point. Yes. It's all about on the expectations and everything. Again, Ashwin also has raised a hand. Ashwin, you can share from your experience. Ashwin, how are we managing worry?
Sorry. Yeah, so I think just to echo Vikas's point, that whole dissonance between who you'd like to be and who you project yourself to be, I think that's the cause of a lot of stress in everyone's lives, right? So again, there are some questions I see in the chat box about profession versus a hobby or a vocation. I think at the end of the day, if you do something that you love, I think that sort of bridges that gap to a large extent. But I also feel, having taken a step in that direction for a few years now, I think it's also about creating that meaning for our lives. It's not necessarily that it has to be a hobby or a vocation that you follow. You might not really love what you do in terms of a job or something. You might be really good at it, but it helps you fulfill other needs in your life, which I think is very good. Yeah, just my personal experience.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone wants to share how are we managing our worries, right? There are some brilliant points has been shared. I think some more participants has been shared. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Srujana. I feel that we can handle this by being more positive and with our hope. Instead of counting, we have to count on our blessings than to count on our curses. So when we see there are a lot of blessings in our life, the sorrows become very minimal. So that way we become more positive and we get the energy out of that positivity. And with hope, we will actually succeed in whatever we want to become. That's my.
No, it's a brilliant point. So we got right 3 different things. Vikas shared about the expectations, what we are currently having it, and then move on it, and your view about on count your blessings. These are all one of the things which the author also has mentioned very clearly on it. But what one other thing which he has mentioned it very clearly is that humor can help break negative cycles and reduce anxiety and worry. That was one of the brilliant points which I found, that how humor can help. And I can also understand from my learning towards on NLP is that humor heals many things in our life. And what do I understand from the audience perspective, that right, how humor has helped in your life? Did you have any experiences which you would like to share, that because of the humor you have eased out some of the situations in your life? I think 3 members have raised their hand. Prem has raised. Yes, Prem, please go ahead. And Vivek is also has raised. Go ahead. Once done with Prem.
Yeah, this is Vivek here.
Yeah, Vivek.
Actually, I didn't raise my hand for humor, but more in terms of handling worry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just that many times we perform, we do a lot of actions in our lives, and we always have that anxiety of what action would lead to. Will it lead to more business? Will it lead to people liking me? Will it lead to some kind of a result? Now, the more we are detached to that result and more concentrate on doing the action, there would be less anxiety and worry. One of my senior colleagues used to always tell me, see, you have a good proposal, you want to tell the management. You give the proposal, you don't worry about whether it will be accepted or not, because at the end of the day, we all make the right decision from the viewpoint of our life, where we are, but the results may or may not come out the way we anticipate. But to keep focusing on the results and not performing the action, like there's a lockdown, so my new project won't be looked at. But you do the action, and then if you don't worry about the result, the amount of worry and anxiety is far reduced in your life.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
something that I've noticed.
No,
Sure.
exactly.
Hi,
Exactly. Yeah.
Prem here. Can I share?
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Now I'm unmuted myself.
Sure, Prem, go.
Hi. This is Prem here, everybody. Good evening, and thanks to TG for inviting me for this first time here. And on the gist of humor, many people generally ask me, especially in interviews and stuff like that, what was the best thing that happened to you? So I tell them, no, the best thing that happened to me was actually getting hit by a truck. I actually got hit by a truck a few years ago, and while I was lying on the road, I was not afraid of dying or anything like that. No, I was just wondering, will I ever find a great girlfriend, or will I ever go and eat in the new restaurant? While I was lying on the road, totally almost like in a comatic stage. I don't know whether it was a macabre sense of humor or whatever. I even told TG this also once, and that is actually and in a sense that instilled in me a sense of discovering within us. I think life happens, but there's something inherent within us which we tend to by way of a process of catharsis, we tend to dissect or even dig it out and then find out, hey, sometimes I could have even laid there and said, oh shit, my life is ending. But then the things, oh damn, I don't think I'll be able to watch great cricket matches anymore. That was actually was going through my mind while people were carrying me to the hospital with broken collarbones and stuff like that. So I could relate to that in Ikigai also, because I also studied a bit of Japanese and stuff like that. So it instilled in me a sense of carpe diem. I don't know where at that moment seize the moment, look into things and just go with the flow. And so a lady was mentioning, count my blessings. I could have actually died, left my parents just like that, but I actually count my blessings. I'm here and healthy now, and that put me a lot of great perspective. It gave me a perspective like I was unfit at the time. I said, let me get better, and I became a lot better in life, and decided to quit a boring job and started copywriting and stuff like that, and met a great person like TG, worked with him in Pixel Studios and Zoya Advertising. So a lot of good things happen. So sometimes life happens and we discover things. So I'm happy about that.
Did you find the girlfriend? Did you find the girlfriend?
Yeah, my girlfriend became my wife finally. my girlfriend became my life partner, the love of my life. Thank you.
Satya, yours is the best question of the day.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's what
I think while you are actually asking questions here, there are some interesting conversations that are going. Where Satya is asking few questions and Ruchi is trying to answer. Madhurika is coming and talking about how to solve worry and things like that on the chat window. That is also pretty interesting. So there are various discussions that are parallelly happening, like how it will happen in a face-to-face meeting. Very interesting. Yeah.
Good. And TJ, I'm just going to go on the next part of it. On it, the other thing which the author has covered it on this concept of the book is about the flow. Which I would like to ask from the audience perspective, right? How do you experience the flow? For example, I can understand my flow when I was doing my programming or when I'm doing my training programs. I used to have a flow. I forget myself and then do it. I would like to understand from the audience perspective that what is your flow and how you have handled it, and what is the moments which you have experienced. Are we able to connect very well with what author is saying about on the flow is what which I would like to get into it. And I'm also having an interesting survey that how the flow is also getting disturbed. So first let me get the responses on the flow from the audience. Who wants to share? Yeah, Mukundan, please.
Hi, I'm Sudash's friend. I'm new to this club.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a medical student too, but I draw for fun. So I make it one of the things that this book focuses on is the importance of rituals. And we all know that the Japanese are too focused on rituals even in daily life. Even if they want to make a tea, they make it in a specific way and stuff like that. So I try to follow. Like I've been a fan of Japan since I was I don't know, since I was a kid, probably because of all the samurai and ninja stuff. But yeah, I try to put myself give I don't know, some sort of ritual before I start anything. For example, I love painting, so I always start my painting with the same song. I never listen to the song other times. It's a Rahman song, but I start my drawing with the same song, and by the end of it, and when I'm drawing, I feel time completely stop, and I can feel that I'm in a flow. I don't think about anything else around me.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's how I feel.
That's exactly the definition what author has said, which I have also posted.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, you will forget yourself when you are doing currently.
Yeah, you don't feel the passing of time at all.
Exactly. That is what is the author, and in this book he has covered it amazingly well, and he has taken the gist of it and put on it. So when we are in the flow, right, when we are working on something very important, and there was an urge in us to check a WhatsApp message, or there's some kind of an email comes, how to handle those situations. So I'm going to open up another survey from the audience to see that how many hours are we spending it in the mobile. Let me share.
You are asking for trouble.
No, Satya. I just would like to understand from the audience how it is has been considered. So same way, just to make us a little bit interesting and then to see what is the pulse of this audience, right? Go again to menti.com and use the code 687150. How many hours do you spend on checking social media?
You need to, Divakar, you need to mention two polls in this. This is pre-COVID period and post-COVID period.
That's a good one, Vikash. Yeah. Let me see that how the things are. So at least we are able to know that the pulse of the audience or pulse of what's happening in Chennai during the COVID situation. This is the right time to invest in the stocks of Facebook or a Fong or any kind of social media shares, I think. It's very interesting, right? The author covers something very deeper. My suggestion to the audience is that if time permits, I would request you to read the book Ikigai, the page number 69 to 73, which author covers very much how we can nurture our flow, how we can forget ourselves by avoiding the distractions and multitasking. So it was very clear that I can see that in 16 members, 63%, 65% is on where people are spending on social media is it's a big awareness, and most of us know very well. I think it has been covered in this Ikigai book also. Is that once we get distracted for one message, again for our brain to come back again, it takes nearly more than 20 to 25 minutes. So it's quite interesting to see, and hopefully we all come back to our normal life after COVID situation. So excellent. So I'm open to the questions now with our book. Anyone has any common questions? Let us discuss it, and then over to you, TG, on it. So thank you, everyone. It was a good discussion.
We didn't discuss that picture. I thought that's the essence of Ikigai.
Yeah, I'll bring up the picture.
We are going to discuss it.
Satya sir, till he brings up the picture, I would like to congratulate all the three new speakers today.
Superb.
It was a fabulously done. The flow was very nice, and all three of you did it very, very well. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Ekta, thanks a lot for bringing that up, because all these three people, probably this is the first time they are doing something like this, and they're all college students, and each one of them personally have chosen their passion, their purpose, and what they are doing is what their Ikigai. So that matters a lot in terms of listening from them, in terms of how they have chosen and what they think about Ikigai, what they love, what their mission, what their passion, and how they want to spend the rest of their lives, in which field they would like to spend. So that is one of the reasons, they are walking Ikigais who made the presentation. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think Atul, who's the last speaker, he did a fabulous job of researching, getting the pronunciation right, and doing that extra bit of research, not just reading the book and bringing in the chapters. So it was really nice to hear all three of you.
Yeah, it's a junior TG.
Yeah, yeah. Today we had a rewind of TG and Satta. It's so nice to see them. If I close my eyes and check, now I thought it's TG speaking.
Wow, I didn't know it was TG's son. So now I know where it's coming from.
So,
Yeah, now
Satta's daughter and Atulya also spoke very well. So good to see. I think that age we didn't have that kind of clarity and ability to speak in public. Super.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Ikigai, I think Satya, you had some questions about in the chat. I was seeing that you wanted to understand some difference, and Ruchi, you are trying to answer more than the question, the answer. Ruchi, are you there?
Helmet, Satya was asking for what's the difference between profession and vocation?
Vocation. So Ruchi, can you highlight from your views, being a clarity coach here?
Yeah, first and foremost, congratulations to all the three speakers. Fantastically done. One of my favorite books, and I loved visiting it all over again. So thank you very much for that. I joined in a little late, but I think I got the essence, never mind. So the discussion I was having more in the chat box was about the difference between a profession and a vocation. And the way I mentioned was profession is something that you can get skilled, you can get trained, and you get paid for. Vocation is something which comes like your calling. So you have a vocation towards something that you want to change. And that is what is a vocation. And if you can get the two to merge, and that is where Ikigai becomes beautiful. If you can get your profession, your vocation, what the world needs, what you're good at, where is your flow, and if you can get all of them together, synchronized, and that's when you find your Ikigai. So vocation and profession are just two parts of it, but I hope it helped. And it was really funny when I was writing that in the chat box, Srijana was speaking, and I just gave an example of a lawyer. So I don't know, Satya sir, you have to tell me whether that gave you clarity or not.
Yes, I've while coaching two people, I've always searched for the answer between the dictionary, what it says, profession, vocation. That was a little confusing, but now you clarified. Thank you so much. So the next question is, what is the difference between passion and the mission?
Sorry, couldn't hear that. Passion and?
Mission.
Passion comes from inside. Mission is where we go with the passion outside. That's the first response that I will probably do.
Sorry, I couldn't get the question. What's the question?
Ruchi, I think he's asking what is the difference between passion and mission.
So,
mission.
So I can once Ruchi answered, I can share some answers to Satya.
Okay, so I think passion is your starting point and mission is your pathway. So mission is how you're going to complete your, how you're going to use your passion to reach your mission. So mission is very actionable, according to me. It comes with a clear plan in which you can make sure, or you can move towards accomplishing your passion. That, according to me, is the difference between a mission and a passion. And I think the difference usually is between a vision and a mission. I don't know how he got a passion in between over there, but this is the way I see it.
No.
Yeah, Devak, would love to hear what you have to say.
No, but Ruchi, for that question, you already have the answer. So I think Satya always asks out of portion questions. Yeah,
no, it's written passion and mission.
Devak, you wanted to share something?
Satya, I'm going to give a little bit humorous and witty answer for this, Satya. The passion is before marriage and mission is after marriage, Satya. So you can read between my lines.
You're talking about survival.
Okay, I have a question for the audience as well as the other speakers, Devakar, Ruchi, people who have explored, who are NLP and things like that. Does passion change over a period of time? Or do we discover new passions as we go along in our lives?
Yeah, I would definitely say that passion you do discover, but I would use the word evolve. You move from what is core in you and it grows. So passion can be in the form of a seedling. It can be in the form of a little, plant. It can be then growing towards becoming a full-fledged tree. So for me, I would say somewhere you will notice in your life that there are patterns, and the patterns will take you towards one underlying passion. Now, identifying that one underlying passion is what is, is really what is the joy and also the challenge. So I would say yes, you evolve in your passion rather than using the word discover, because discover means you might have multiple passions. But I feel that if you are in flow and if you are with your innermost desires or innermost core requirements, then you actually evolve. So I would replace the word discover with the word evolve.
Okay, I have a different view. Yeah, I have a different view on this. It's all about on the choices we make, and we will always come to know that hey, this is what is I really require. Your heart will easily communicate it. Even if you explore the Eastern principle, it was very clear about what is your Swadharma, right? And there was a lot of a thin difference between the logic and intuition. And once we are able to marry both logic and emotion or an intuition, things will automatically fall into place. And let us take an example of Steve Jobs, right? Or A.R. Rahman. I got some personal opportunity to interact with him, or even Bill Gates, if you read about it, right? They never explored that they are going to go with a mission that they are going to earn more money, or that is what is their ikigai or purpose. They were doing what they are really good at it, and they were in a complete flow, and that has opened up new paths for them, and they explored it further into it. And if you notice in all their lives, right, they all have their ups and downs, and it's naturally getting aligned with their life goals and move on it. That is what is my view on it. And it's all about on serendipity also, that how it goes into taking forward.
Correct.
Okay, so
the outer circles of these TG is quite simpler. What I understand from this is, if you attend to that inner calling, as Ruchi says, the vocation is inner calling, and make that as a profession by getting more trained on that for that inner calling, and keep that as the passion, and do it with a missionary zeal. Okay, so not leaving it this thing consistently, you do it, and then obviously you love what you do, and you will be good at it, and world needs it, so they'll pay for it. So that's what my take from this discussion.
And I can also share an interesting view. There is an author called Adam Grant who has written a book called Give and Take. He has a different view, and the same way there is another author who has written a book called Deep Work. He has written a view that don't go what you love. So there are some arguments still going on what you love and what you do, but it is all about on individual choice, how the life is throwing about them, and then to take it forward is what I'm realizing it very frequently now.
Thanks, Divakar. Somebody raised a hand. I think, is it Mukundan? You want to share something here?
TG, it's me.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, please tell me, Nisha.
Hi, TG. Thank you for inviting me to this book club.
Oh, Nisha, yeah. Okay.
Really wonderful to be here. Yeah, so I had something to say about passion. So what I thought passion is something that doesn't come with conditions. It's as in it's very synonymous with love, if you see, in a way. So if you see there's a mother, okay, and she performs all her duties, all her day-to-day duties, and without any sort of expectations in return. So when you see in that sense, passion comes without any conditions, like, I mean, but then yes, if we are able to unconditionally give ourselves fully into a task or something without expecting something in return, we are still passionate about it, isn't it? I mean, it's not like we expect the passion to pay us back or something like that. So I think passion is something which is in it. I think passion is in it. Passion is I don't know. It's
You just
yeah,
accept.
I hope you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So
it's there.
it's a
Like, you
mix of
can't
all
change.
things.
It's that
Yeah.
background hum music that is going on forever. It'll keep on.
Yeah, and one day your mom is just pissed off with you. She doesn't want to make something for you because she's really angry, because she has so many chores to do. Doesn't mean that she's less passionate. So I think passion is in it. You discover, you rediscover it, and then and then it's kind of like a cycle. Like so.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Thanks for the sharing. I think
Thank you so much.
we have probably another few minutes left for us to wind the session. Is there anybody else who would like to share what is going on in their mind? I want to give the opportunity to you so that you can share, whatever you wanted to share. You can unmute and share.
Celebration time, TG. First time we crossed 50.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's great.
Yeah, at one point of this thing, during the peak time of this meeting, we were 51. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah. TG, I have some e-certificates for the speakers, TG. So in the end, I will flood it up.
That's great, Devaka. That's great. They deserve it. They deserve it. So anybody wants to share anything as a passing remark? Sridhanya, Sampath.
Hi.
Hi. You want to share something? Manoj, you're silent. Madhurika, I want to hear your voice.
So,
yeah, Sridhanya,
can I go?
Yeah. Please.
Yeah. So this is my first session, and I thank Vaishnav for inviting me here. And yeah, I mean, the group entirely had given me a lot of clarifications for a question which I raised. It's about the worry part. And this is a really insightful session. I mean, rather than reading a book on our own and trying to figure out what are we inferring out of the book, these are different viewpoints and different interceptions of a particular book, and this is very insightful. And yeah, I'm looking forward for this. Yeah.
Thanks, Sridhanya. Thank you so much. Sampath, yes, please go ahead, Sampath.
Lakshmi also has raised her hand.
Yeah. But thank COVID, I should thank only for this because we get lovely presentations made.
Yeah.
And two, very interesting. Today's was amazing actually. They did a fabulous job, and you learned so much. As good as reading a book today. Amazing work.
Exactly. And to thanks Sampath, and to answer Sridhanya also, we read the book and we infer whatever we want to infer. So we go with the book saying that whatever I have understood is also there in the book. So here you come over and discuss, and then you find actually there are many views, right? So and we can.
No, it's a synopsis, but very well made synopsis.
Yes, I definitely agree that.
Thanks.
And if there's a recording of this, it will be lovely, TG.
It's being recorded. It's being recorded. Let's see whether I will discuss
so
it.
It will be lovely to read because you can keep it in the back of your mind.
Sure.
Thanks, TG. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think somebody else wanted to share.
Lakshmi Sarva.
Yes, this is Lakshmi. Well, this is my second participation in the meeting, and thank you, Satya, for inviting me. Two things I wanted to say my views about. I'm not sure if somebody else has said it. Well, it's there in the book. One is about the worry part. What I wanted to say is the author takes an example of a mother, I guess, and I have read just half part of the book only. I'm yet to complete it. The lady looks back, reflects on her life back, and realizes like she has been worrying in vain. I think it's about her child. Was it demented child or paralyzed child, something like that. What I think is put yourself in a situation as if it's the last day of your life and think whether it really matters. Sometimes we can always when we look back, say couple of years back and we reflect on our past, we do understand like something what really worried us actually didn't matter much. So we need to basically put ourselves in that position to understand whether it really matters. That is for the worry part. And I think there was something regarding the distraction and how to avoid it. Regarding that also, the author has spoken about a technique called Pomodoro technique. Well, I would say that I had been following that all my life, ever since my college days, but I never knew such a word existed until I read the book this morning. But I think it's an excellent one, because when I see the children, today's children especially, having their laptop and phone with them, and when they study, like basically trying to do the multitasking, studying and then looking at the messages and all that. What I used to do as a student in those days is like set up a timer for an hour and study. Like even today, like if I have to focus on something, I just set up a timer for 30 minutes or 1 hour and I go about the task. Like I don't allow any distractions to come in. That way I feel I can do my work more productively.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Madhulika, you raised your hand. I would like to hear from you, every one of us. Unmute.
So, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Madhulika. I'm Sudash's friend. And it's my first time over here. And I feel really happy to have been part of this session because all of the speakers, whoever spoke today, I think they made this concept like really simple to understand and grasp, even though it's actually not like that, but you guys made it really simple for me to understand and really think about it going on in the future. So yeah, and I would also like to congratulate the speakers of today because they really clearly presented whatever they wanted to, their views and their thoughts on their respective chapters. And regarding a previous point that was told about passion, I really think I would agree and say that it's actually something that evolves. Like for me personally, when I was in school, like I used to learn guitar, and that's how I know Sudash. So I thought that was my passion at that point of time, but now it's actually kind of evolved, and I'm more like I did my architecture, and now I moved on to more urbanism, the urbanism side of architecture. So I think it keeps evolving. That is my personal experience and like something that I would like to share. So maybe there's some common ground between all of these things, but I'm yet to discover that. So yeah, let's see.
It's a brilliant example. I think you have given a brilliant answer for passion and mission.
So for a moment I thought it was Madhurika. TJ, for a moment I thought it was Madhurika. I was thinking, how is she coming? Madhulika.
I saw. Nikita,
Madhulika is my daughter.
Nikita, please go ahead.
It's me, TG, actually.
Hey, Sujana, you want to share something? Yes, yeah.
So when it comes to worry, I want people to think on these two lines, which was said earlier. In the sense, like the first thing is that if there is something which you have to do, which you can do towards what you're worrying, then you need not worry because you already have a solution available, and so you need not worry. The second line of thought is if there is nothing, if it is out of your hands, and if there is nothing that you can do towards what you're worrying, then why worry? So in both the cases, what they say is, at the end of the day, worrying is a waste of time. So that is what basically they say. So if there is a solution, need not worry. If there is no solution at all, why worry? You can't do anything about it.
And it is coming from the best of the person who can talk about worry because it's coming from an advocate. Yeah. And many people, our clients, who are worrying, right? So. Excellent. I think Mukundan, did you raise your hand or is it the earlier?
I think it's the earlier one, I think.
Yes,
oh, okay. I actually have something to say about the same. Hello.
Yeah, please go on. Go ahead.
Yeah. The previous opinion was perfect, and I think this book, stands as the best example of the Eastern Buddhist principle of desire is the cause of all evil. We tend to mistake it. Like I don't know, even I mistook it when I heard it first. But desire means the disparity between our expectation and reality, and that's what this book says. Bad things will keep happening to you. Things will go against your expectations. But you need not react to them. you can accept your feelings, you can accept your bad condition, but you need not react to it. And see, that's that's given in the basic principles of Morita therapy. Accept your feelings and all that. And you should just accept your feelings and keep doing what you're doing, because that's what you're passionate about, and that will automatically lead you to your goal. And at the same time, you should not be just focused on your goal. In that case, you'll develop unnecessary expectations. That's that's given in that Olympic medal example and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you need to have that in your mind. But if you keep thinking about it the whole time, you won't be focusing on your work. And again, it comes back to the whole concept of flow and finding flow. So we should find pleasure in.
Yeah, I think the way you are communicating, it's like it's so interlinked, right? And what I observe from this entire thing is the inference. What I have is that desires are per se or branded, that is negative. But desires born out of your duty and passion are actually the right way to go towards a mission. So
exactly,
if the desire is coming through because of your passion. You have all the rights. In fact, it is your moral responsibility to go ahead and fill it up. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I think too. Your passion won't let you sleep.
Yeah. So those desires are something which you go after.
Yeah. That's exactly what I thought. I used to mistake the same too. I thought, okay, you should. I thought it was stupid. The Buddhist principle was stupid. Like, how can someone not desire anything? You want to achieve something, and the saying goes against it. But then I realized this is what it actually means.
Yeah,
and in the part about immortality, it seems like it's a far-fetched thing. Humans can't achieve immortality. But I recently read a book called Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, by the same guy who wrote *Sapiens*. There was a chapter on immortality. He says it's not as far-fetched as we might think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Satya here. Satya with H. I think it's I will need to leave here.
Yeah, it's
thanks
time.
for
Every one of us is busy.
Just
we can continue. We can go on and on. But I think we have
I would
given
like to
everyone an opportunity to speak up. Thanks, Divakar, for the certificate. So it is looking so good.
Thank you, Soumya, for a wonderful session. You really prepared it amazingly well. Thank you, Atulya. We will send this to your email. Keep it as a e-certificate, and it will reflect you after a long time. After 10 years, you will see that you have done a good job. What you did it during COVID. And thank you, Sudarshan, for your wonderful session on the diet, and it was really good. Actually, we are able to get it from a doctor is special for us. Thank you. And you three have actually made us very proud that we can explore more, and you guys are going to be the ambassadors of the young Indians in the future. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also Divakar, Satya, to all the three presenters. This is an experiment that we did, that why not we have few new people to come and talk about a book from different angles. The participation has been really warm, and the encouragement is accepted. We will go on. We're covering more and more books, and I want to leave this meeting with one question. If all of us are in the process of discovering our own passion and ikigai that is not fixed and it is ever evolving, like what we just discussed. If that is what a personal thing is all about, can we ever understand the ikigai or the passion or an evolving interest of our kids? So the next meeting, we are going to discuss about parenting. So thank you so much. Wish you all the best and tide over the COVID fears, and stay safe. And thanks for joining once again. Thank you.
Bye, TG. Thanks so much.
Thank you, TG. Thank you for inviting me.
Divakar, I call you 2 times.